I'm Sean, I'm 32, and for the most part, I like to stay out of drama. I'm not the type to pick fights or make a scene. I've always believed people show you who they are eventually. You just have to watch. That philosophy came in handy more than once growing up in my family, where appearances mattered more than reality, and quiet resentment simmered beneath every smile. My older brother, Darren, was always the loud one, the golden one, 2 years older than me, and somehow always center stage. He had the big personality, the jokes that everyone forced themselves to laugh at, the flashy stories that didn't always add up, but went unchallenged because, well, that's Darren. Our parents, especially our mom, treated him like he could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I played the role of the good kid in the background. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who remembered to lock the doors and return the shopping cart. Not that it earned me much recognition. Growing up, Darren would do things like borrow my stuff without asking, blame me when things went missing, and my parents would shrug it off like, he's just being a big brother. If I so much as rolled my eyes at him, I'd get the whole respect your elders talk. I learned early to just keep my head down, work hard, and not expect fairness. In high school, Darren scraped by on charm and excuses, while I buried myself in books and part-time jobs. He crashed 2 of my parents' cars by the time he was 20. I bought my own at 22, and somehow they still acted like he was the accomplished one because he talked about starting a business someday. That someday turned into a decade of vague projects, failed side hustles, and a whole lot of almost moments. Meanwhile, I built a life that didn't make much noise. After college, I took a steady job in logistics, lived below my means, and spent weekends helping out at my uncle's property, an old family estate that needed upkeep. My uncle never married or had kids, and I'd always been close to him. He liked that I showed up without needing to be asked. He liked that I didn't treat the house like a free vacation spot, the way Darren did. When Uncle Mike passed away a year ago, he left everything to me. That came as a surprise to no one, really, except Darren, who called me the night after the will reading and said, "Wow, that must feel weird, huh? Getting something you didn't earn." I remember just staring at my phone after that. I didn't reply. I think something in me finally clicked off that night. I'd spent 31 years swallowing things like that from him, letting them pass, telling myself he didn't mean it that way, that he was insecure or jealous or whatever excuse I could come up with to keep the peace. But there's only so many times someone can undermine you before it stops feeling like brotherly ribbing and starts feeling like straight-up contempt. The thing about Darren is, he never fails quietly. When something in his life goes wrong, he doesn't just take the hit and regroup. He throws a tantrum or starts pointing fingers. And when he smells even a whiff of success on someone else, especially me, it curdles something in him. That became clear during our last family dinner. It was our mom's birthday. She wanted everyone together. It had been a while since we were all in the same room, and I knew I'd have to sit through Darren's latest plans for his crypto investing food truck gym hybrid or whatever he was on now. But I went, brought a gift, stayed polite. We had dinner at some overpriced place Mom picked, one of those restaurants with dim lighting, minimalist food, and loud tablecloths that cost more than my car insurance. The conversation was already rocky. Darren was 3 drinks in and talking over everyone, giving updates on a massive opportunity he had brewing, all while barely touching his plate. I mostly listened, smiled when necessary, nodded when appropriate. I'd gotten good at that. At one point, he started talking about how some people spend their whole lives working for other people, chasing security instead of success. His words, not even subtle. And then, right as the waiter was refilling our waters, he turned to me with that smug half-smile and said, "Isn't that right, Sean? You'd know. I mean, not everyone's cut out for ambition." He chuckled like he'd just made the most charming joke. Everyone else went quiet. My mom gave a tight little smile, like she was trying to pretend she didn't hear it. My dad looked at his fork, and I just took a sip of my drink. It was red wine. Dry, bitter. My mouth was dry too, but not from the wine. I didn't respond. Not out loud. But something about that moment felt different. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel the need to defend myself or prove him wrong. I just felt done. Done playing the quiet brother who lets things slide for the sake of family harmony. Done being the background character in my own life so Darren could keep his inflated sense of superiority. That dinner ended like all our family dinners do. Awkward hugs, half-hearted goodbyes, and promises to catch up soon that no one means. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Darren had no idea what was coming, and I wasn't going to warn him. Let him keep talking. Let him feel big. Let him believe I was the failure. Because a week later, I got a call. From him. And that's where things started to get interesting. The call came on a Thursday. I remember because I was coming back from a supplier meeting, trying to beat traffic, and my phone buzzed with Darren's name just as I was pulling into my apartment garage. I stared at the screen for a second. I hadn't heard from him since the dinner, and part of me debated whether to even pick up. But curiosity won out. "Sean," he said, sounding chipper. "Hey man, got a sec?" I hadn't even said hello yet. "Sure," I said cautiously, parking the car and killing the engine. "What's up?" "So listen," he began, tone breezy, like we were lifelong pals who hadn't had a weird family dinner just days before. "You know I've been working on that new venture, right? The boutique fitness line? Custom apparel meets wellness content." "Right." The one he'd barely mentioned during dinner in between swipes at my life choices. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, I finally secured a partner. Investor out of Austin. Guy's a beast. But we need to move fast, and I'm locking down the capital side now. Just need to finalize the bank loan. Super standard, nothing crazy, but they need someone to co-sign. Just formality." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly where this was going. He kept talking like he hadn't noticed the silence. "The underwriter just needs someone with stable income, good credit, and some tied assets to sign on. Temporary. 6 months max. You wouldn't even feel it. No actual liability." I leaned back in the seat, staring at the garage ceiling. "And you want me to co-sign?" "Yeah," he said, without a shred of hesitation. "I mean, you're the obvious choice. You've got the house now, right? Uncle Mike's place? The deed's already transferred, isn't it?" I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I said, "Why not ask Mom and Dad?" "Oh, come on." He laughed, like I'd made a joke. "They're not going to sign anything. You know how Dad is with his credit score paranoia. And Mom, she'd have a nervous breakdown if you handed her a legal document. No offense, but you're the only one who actually owns anything. Or makes enough. You're set up. It's not even a favor, really, more like a temporary bridge." A bridge. That's how he saw me. A structure to walk over to get somewhere better. I said nothing for a beat. He added quickly, "Obviously, I'll throw you some equity in the company once things take off. We're talking real valuation potential here. You'd be an early stakeholder. Win-win." That call ended with me telling him I'd think about it. Not because I needed time. I already knew what my answer was. But because I wanted him to stew. To let that desperation build just a little longer. He hung up assuming I'd cave. And that's the problem with Darren. He's lived his whole life assuming I'd always say yes. Or at the very least, never say no. He got used to the idea of me being the fallback guy. The one who didn't argue. The one who bailed him out without asking questions. But I was getting real tired of that role. Still, the call opened a floodgate I hadn't prepared for. Over the next few days, I got texts from Mom. First casual. "Hey sweetie, just wanted to check in. Darren said he mentioned something about a loan. Maybe you could help him out." Then more direct. "He's finally got a real opportunity, Sean. This could be his big break. Don't be stubborn." Stubborn. That word stung a little. Then came the call from Dad, who rarely ever called. His tone was clipped, almost formal. "I know Darren's had his missteps," he said, which was a hilarious understatement. "But he's trying to turn a corner. Maybe you could support him. That's what family does, right?" What family does? Interesting. I didn't recall Darren supporting me when I was working 2 jobs through college or when I was pulling 16-hour shifts during the supply chain crisis last year. He didn't even show up to Uncle Mike's funeral, claimed he was out of state on business, though I later saw tagged photos of him at a pool party that same weekend. But now I was the one being difficult. I didn't respond to any of it. Just let the silence do the work. I could feel the tension rising with each ignored message. But what really twisted the knife was what happened that Sunday. My parents invited me over for lunch. They framed it as casual. Mom even said, "Just some family time, nothing serious." But the second I walked into their house, I knew I'd walked into a setup. Darren was already there, perched on the living room couch like a smug peacock. He stood when he saw me, arms open like we were long-lost war buddies. "Sean, good. You're here," he said, as if I were late to a meeting he'd scheduled. My parents smiled too wide. Mom had that desperate shine in her eyes that only ever came out when she was trying to smooth over something ugly with fake warmth. Dad clapped me on the back like we were teammates. The whole vibe was off. We sat down. Mom brought out iced tea and some cookies, and Darren launched into his pitch again, this time with slides. Literal slides on a tablet he had ready. I just want to show you the numbers, he said, tapping through charts and projections. We've got brand partnerships lined up. Influencer outreach scheduled. This thing's going to fly. I sipped my tea, watched him talk. Noticed the way he didn't once ask how I was doing or what I'd been up to. The conversation was entirely about him, his plans, his vision, his success, contingent, of course, on me co-signing a 5-figure loan. When he was done, he looked at me expectantly. So, he said, you in? I glanced at my parents. Mom was wringing her hands in her lap. Dad gave me a look that said, just go along with it. I set the glass down and said, I haven't decided. That wiped the smile off Darren's face. What's there to decide? He asked, like the concept of me needing time was insulting. I need to think it through, I repeated calmly. His jaw tightened. It's not like you're risking anything. Actually, I was. But more than that, I wasn't about to let him pretend this was a harmless little favor. I knew how Darren operated. If the business flopped, and statistically, most do, I'd be the one stuck holding the bag. And even if it didn't, he'd never give me credit for anything. I'd become part of his success story in the worst way, the invisible scaffolding that held him up while he bragged about being self-made. After that lunch, things got nastier. He started sending me links to articles about how to support your siblings and inspirational quotes about trusting your family. One even said, real brothers don't keep score. The irony made me laugh out loud. A few days later, I bumped into our cousin Elena at the grocery store. She greeted me with a hug and then casually said, hey, I heard you're making Darren jump through hoops for that loan. Kinda harsh, isn't it? So he was running a PR campaign now. Even my Aunt Carol called me. Aunt Carol, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year since I didn't show up to her dog's birthday party. She launched into a speech about how families succeed together or fail together. I politely told her to go pet her schnauzer and hung up. Meanwhile, Darren started posting cryptic things on social media. It's always the ones you think will have your back who disappoint you the most. Lesson learned. And some people talk about loyalty. Others just drink wine and watch you drown. Wine. Real subtle. Friends started asking if we were okay. I told them the truth. We're brothers. That was enough of an explanation. The pressure campaign was working overtime. But what none of them knew, what even Darren didn't know, was that the bank had already reached out to me. Because yes, my name was on the deed. And yes, it was required for the loan. But they'd contacted me directly, as the primary title holder, to ask for verification and consent. I hadn't signed. I hadn't refused, either. I'd simply said, not at this time. And just like that, his application stalled. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. Total radio silence. Then, one evening, he showed up at my door. No warning. Just knocked, loud and fast, like he was entitled to be let in. I opened it and saw him standing there, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot, clutching a crumpled folder of paperwork. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I owed him, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He paced around my living room like a caged animal, muttering about bureaucracy and timelines and idiots who don't understand vision. Eventually, he turned to me and said, I need you to sign this today. If we don't get it through by Friday, the deal dies. I looked at the folder, then at him. Why me, Darren? I asked. Really, why not go to your investor? Or get a smaller loan? Or scale down? His mouth twisted. Because they want a tangible asset behind it. And you have one. Uncle Mike gave it to you. Not because you earned it, but because he pitied you. You were his project. I stood up, heart pounding. There it was. The truth. Not just entitlement, but disdain. He didn't see me as family. He saw me as a resource. A soft touch. A safety net. And in that moment, I made my decision. But I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. I just looked him dead in the eye. And let the silence speak. And as I watched him shift, uncomfortable for the first time in a long time, I knew. The real show was just beginning. Darren left my apartment that night with a tight jaw and a stiff nod, clutching the folder like it was his lifeline. He didn't say thank you. Didn't apologize. Didn't even pretend to respect my hesitation. He left assuming I'd come around. That I was just being dramatic. That I'd eventually do what I always did, bend. But something about that conversation stayed with me. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind kept going back to his words. You didn't earn it. Uncle Mike pitted you. The nerve of that. After everything I'd done, visiting Uncle Mike every weekend, fixing the leaky roof, shoveling snow in the winter, organizing his medication, sitting with him when he got too tired to speak. Darren had the audacity to call that pity. As if I hadn't been the only one showing up. But what came next? That's what really broke me. 2 days passed with no word. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from the bank. A different rep this time. The tone was professional, but a little confused. Mr. Wexler, the woman said, we received the updated deed document this morning with your digital signature confirming co-signature approval for Mr. Darren Wexler's loan. Just doing a routine follow-up to confirm submission was legitimate before processing. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, I said slowly. What document? The updated property deed cosign agreement. It lists your electronic approval via DocuSign and was uploaded through the partner portal this morning. Timestamped at 9:42 a.m. My blood went cold. I never signed anything, I told her. I haven't touched a document. There was a pause on her end. I could hear her clicking through something. That's strange. It says the form was signed using your registered email and matching last 4 digits of your SSN. I'll go ahead and flag this for further verification. Thank you for confirming. I hung up, heart racing, and immediately opened my email. Nothing from DocuSign. No alerts. No requests. No confirmations. Then I checked my spam folder. And there it was. A single notification, timestamped at 9:42 a.m., confirming a signed document with my name on it. I clicked through, and my chest tightened. It was the deed cosign agreement. My name, my email, even my digital signature, copied from a prior form I'd signed years ago when transferring ownership of Uncle Mike's utilities. It was forged. I didn't even need to guess who did it. I opened a new tab and logged into my cloud storage, the one where I'd stored scanned PDFs of the house documents. The access history showed a login 3 days ago from a new device. A MacBook. Not mine. Darren. I remembered he'd borrowed my laptop once when his crashed. Must have saved the password somewhere. Or worse, he had snooped and grabbed copies of the original files without me knowing. My hands were shaking. Not out of fear. Not even anger. Disgust. He didn't even ask again. He just decided to take. He'd crossed a line I didn't think he was capable of crossing. And the worst part? He probably thought he could explain it away. Spin it into another misunderstanding. Something he could fix with a joke or a half apology. I called the bank immediately and filed a fraud report. I explained what happened. They froze the application and locked the digital access, pending investigation. They told me to expect a follow-up from their legal team. I spent the rest of that afternoon changing passwords, securing my accounts, and texting an old college friend who worked in IT security. He walked me through checking for malware and setting up alerts. I wasn't taking any chances. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Mom called. Not to check on me. Not to ask if I was okay after learning her son committed fraud using my name. No. She called to yell, Sean, what on earth did you tell the bank? I blinked. What? Darren just called me in tears. You embarrassed him. You got his loan frozen. Why would you do that to him? My jaw dropped. Because he forged my signature. He committed fraud. He tried to use my identity without my consent. Maybe he made a mistake, she said, her voice shaking but not with concern, more like with desperation. You know how badly he needs this. He said you were dragging your feet, that you weren't being supportive. Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. He used my social security number. That's not a mistake. That's a felony. She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. Finally, she said, he's your brother. And I lost it. For how long does that excuse work? I snapped. How many times does he get to lie, steal, manipulate, and hide behind he's your brother? She was quiet. I could picture her in the kitchen, wringing a dish towel, eyes darting toward the doorway, hoping Dad would walk in and smooth things over. This isn't a squabble over toys, Mom, I continued. He committed actual identity fraud. I could lose my house over this. I could go to court. And you're calling to scold me. I'm not scolding, she began, but I cut her off. Yes, you are. You always do. You act like he's this fragile child who needs to be protected, and I'm the stone you throw at problems to make them disappear. That silenced her again. I have done everything right, I said, voice low. I've never asked you for anything. Not when I was broke. Not when Dad forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Not when Uncle Mike got sick and I needed help. I never threw fits. I never stole. And yet somehow, every time Darren messes up, I'm the one who gets the guilt trip. Her voice was small. He's just struggling. He's been struggling for 12 years, I said. At what point do we call it what it is? She didn't answer. I hung up. I don't regret it. But I won't lie, it hurt. I sat on my couch for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling. Not angry, just hollow, like a balloon that had finally deflated after holding its shape for years. The next morning, my dad showed up at my door. He looked tired, older. His hair was more gray than I remembered. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there on the porch, hat in his hand. Your mother told me everything, he said quietly. I didn't say anything. I'm not here to defend what he did, he added. What he did was wrong. No excuse. That surprised me. Dad always played referee. He hated confrontation, especially when it involved choosing sides. Seeing him there, so solemn, felt like something had cracked. He looked past me, into my apartment. You've done well, he said, almost like it hurt to admit it. I don't say it enough. I nodded. Thanks. Then he added, but he's still your brother. And there it was again. That sentence. That unspoken rule. That ancient family code etched into every interaction we'd ever had. I didn't say anything. I just shut the door. Not hard. Not loud. Just firm. That night, I got a call from the bank again. They'd completed their preliminary investigation. The signature was indeed falsified. The metadata on the file confirmed it had been edited from a device that wasn't mine. They were freezing the application indefinitely and flagging Darren in their internal fraud database. They gave me the option of pressing charges. I told them I needed time to think, because deep down, some small, shrinking part of me still wanted to believe this could be salvaged. That Darren would call, apologize, explain. But that's not what happened. Instead, he doubled down. The next day, he posted a long rant on Facebook. It started with a vague, "Some people will always be jealous of those who take risks," and spiraled into a full-blown character assassination. He painted himself as the visionary, the dreamer, the one who was trying to lift himself up while I, the bitter younger brother, pulled him down out of spite. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew. Comments poured in. Some supportive, some skeptical. But the one that gutted me was from our own cousin, Elena. Honestly, this tracks. Sean's always been kinda uptight. No offense. No offense. It was like my whole life had been rewritten by Darren's version. And people believed it. Because he said it louder, flashier, with more emojis. And all I had was the truth. But the truth didn't matter to people who were addicted to his drama, to the theatrics, to the carefully crafted story of the underdog older brother who just needed a little help from his stingy, bitter sibling. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. After the Facebook post, everything got quiet, but not the kind of peaceful, resolved quiet. It was the heavy kind, like the air before a storm. The kind of silence where every phone buzz makes you flinch, every knock on the door feels like it might come with bad news, and even the people who once smiled at you in passing suddenly look away like you're carrying something contagious. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't clap back or post some righteous thread defending myself. I didn't even comment on anyone's response, though I read all of them, twice. I saw the likes Darren's post got from old friends, second cousins, even people I hadn't spoken to since high school. It was like watching people walk past a burning house and toss a marshmallow on the way. But I stayed silent. Not because I was scared, but because I knew something Darren never had the patience to learn. People always reveal themselves, and the longer you stay still, the more they dance in front of you thinking they've already won. Still, that didn't mean it didn't hurt. There's something uniquely brutal about being painted as the villain in your own family, especially when you've spent your whole life being the stable one, the reliable one. I was the guy who babysat cousins at the last minute, showed up early to weddings to help with the setup, and sent birthday cards when nobody else remembered. I'd always kept my head down, hoping that one day it would count for something, that my quiet loyalty would be recognized. But now, I was the bitter little brother, the jealous one, the failure who didn't want his brother to succeed. And the worst part? I didn't know who believed it. The calls stopped. Invitations to family get-togethers vanished. Aunts and uncles I used to see every few months suddenly weren't hosting this year. I found out from a neighbor that there had been a barbecue at my parents' house the previous weekend, one I was very clearly not invited to. My cousin James, who used to ask me for job references and interview tips, unfollowed me on LinkedIn. It was like someone had flipped a switch and I'd become radioactive. I tried to keep going with my life. I buried myself in work, took extra shifts, offered to cover for a coworker going on paternity leave just so I'd have something, anything, to keep my mind from spinning in place. But it followed me home every night. I'd walk past the front room of Uncle Mike's house, the one I hadn't finished renovating yet, and feel a wave of guilt and bitterness. That room was supposed to be a library, a peaceful space. But all I saw now was everything I'd lost while trying to do things the right way. And then came the real gut punch. The county tax assessor's office sent me a letter saying there had been a formal inquiry filed disputing the legitimacy of the deed transfer on Uncle Mike's property. An anonymous claim alleging that the inheritance was inappropriately secured and in conflict with prior family expectations. I called the number listed. The woman on the line was polite but firm. She said the office was required to investigate all formal disputes, regardless of merit. She couldn't tell me who filed it, but she didn't need to. There was only one person petty, angry, and reckless enough to try to blow up the one thing in my life that actually mattered to me. I hung up, hands shaking. This wasn't just an attack. It was sabotage. And for the first time in years, I cried. Not just a few tears. I mean the kind of crying you do when it finally hits you that the people you've spent your whole life trying to make proud were never going to see you. Not really. That you were always going to be the backup, the utility, the silent support beam that no one noticed until it cracked under the weight of being everyone else's foundation. I didn't answer calls for days. I muted every group chat. I skipped a company happy hour I'd been looking forward to. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in that half-renovated library room, surrounded by paint cans and old books and the dust of a man who actually believed in me, and wondered how things had come to this. I felt like a stranger in my own story. That was rock bottom. But even then, something was shifting. A strange calm settled over me. It wasn't peace, exactly. It was more like resolve. A clarity that came not from inspiration, but from having absolutely nothing left to lose. That night, I went through Uncle Mike's files. I pulled out every document, his will, the title transfer, the notarized paperwork, every receipt from every time I paid for repairs or materials out of pocket. I made a digital folder and backed it up in 3 places. I booked an appointment with a real estate lawyer I'd met once during the transfer process. She remembered me. "You're the nephew who showed up in work boots," she said on the phone. "Come by. We'll get it sorted." I felt something stir in me. A heartbeat. The first flicker of momentum. Then I did something else, something small, but important. I made a list. It wasn't a revenge list, not exactly. Just a column of facts. Dates. Interactions. Screenshots. Bank statements. A paper trail. Not to use right away, but to have. Because if this was going to escalate, and I knew Darren well enough to assume it would, I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. And while I was doing that, I started quietly walking away. I unfriended people. Silently. No drama. No calls. Just gone. I deleted old text threads, archived emails, changed the locks. I went to a local cafe and met with an old friend I hadn't seen in a year. Someone who used to work with me before she moved on to a consulting firm. We sat by the window, drank coffee, and laughed about things unrelated to Darren or my family, or the lawsuit I could feel looming on the horizon. That moment was the first I'd felt like myself in weeks. The next day, I got a text from my dad. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. He followed up with a voicemail. I didn't listen. Then a third message. "Your mother's very upset. Darren said you're hiring lawyers now. Do you really want to take this that far?" That far. As if I had been the one to forge signatures. As if I had been the one to file a fake complaint with the tax office. As if I had been the one dragging our family through the mud. I turned my phone off. For 2 full days. No messages. No drama. No updates. And in that silence, I remembered what it felt like to have peace. I started waking up early again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I made breakfast. Real food. Eggs and toast, not just gas station coffee. I went for walks. I deleted Facebook. I stopped checking who was still in my corner and started building my own. By the time the lawyer called me back with the news that the dispute against my deed was officially dismissed due to lack of merit and clear ownership documentation, I didn't even smile. I just nodded. Of course it was. Darren's reach had always been shallow. Loud, yes, but shallow. His whole world was built on noise, and noise only works when people pay attention. I was done paying attention, but he wasn't done. A week after the dismissal, I found out Darren had taken a job with one of those influencer incubator startups. The kind that sells motivational merch and hustle lifestyle branding while bleeding investors dry. I knew it wouldn't last. But more importantly, I knew it meant he was still out there, trying to build something. Still trying to sell himself as a success. Which meant he still needed something. Credibility. And I was the one person left who could ruin that with a single conversation. I didn't do anything. Not yet. But I kept the folder open on my laptop. I kept the emails, the screenshots, the voicemail from the bank, the fake signature, the digital trail. I kept it all and waited, because rock bottom doesn't mean you stay down. Sometimes it's just where you stop sinking long enough to push off. Rock bottom didn't announce its exit. It didn't send a notice or leave a parting gift. It just slowly loosened its grip. I started noticing it in the quiet, mundane moments. Those little pockets of stillness that didn't feel like dread anymore. I'd wake up and, for once, not feel like I was bracing for an emotional sucker punch. I'd walk into work without feeling like I was dragging invisible chains behind me. Even the old hardwood floors in Uncle Mike's house didn't creak with that heavy, haunted tone anymore. They sounded like what they were, just floors. The house, which had become a symbol of conflict, started to feel like mine again. I repainted the library, the one room that had been left untouched during the chaos. I picked a deep navy blue for the walls and added warm amber lighting. I cleared out the old furniture and replaced it with pieces I found secondhand, solid wood, minimalist, comfortable. Then I built shelves, dozens of them, by hand. I used Uncle Mike's old tools, the ones I'd learned to use as a teenager under his supervision. Each night, I worked on those shelves, slowly restoring what had once been a room of solitude and turning it into something even better, something that would become the heart of the home. Meanwhile, my career began to shift. I didn't realize how much mental energy Darren had been draining from me until I felt it returning. I became more present at work, more proactive. I started offering ideas in meetings that I would have second-guessed before. I led a project reworking a supply chain system for one of our biggest clients, and it ended up saving them 11% in transportation costs. My manager took notice. So did the regional director. 3 months after that disastrous family barbecue I hadn't been invited to, I got promoted. Not just a raise, an actual title bump. Operations lead. With it came a bigger office, a flexible schedule, and enough clout that I was suddenly getting emails from people who used to ignore me. My opinion mattered. My presence mattered. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just the dependable guy in the background. I was steering things. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because it felt sacred, like something that didn't need to be polluted by their reactions or buried under another Darren-centric conversation. It was mine. Around that same time, my social life began to quietly mend itself too. Remember that friend I met for coffee, the one who used to work with me? Her name's Ava. We'd always been close, but life had pulled us in different directions. After that catch-up, we started talking more, grabbing dinner once a week, then twice. Then going on weekend hikes. She was one of the few people who never asked me to explain the situation with Darren. She didn't press for gossip or give me unsolicited advice. She just listened when I wanted to talk and let the silence sit comfortably when I didn't. 6 months after the forged document fiasco, she invited me to her sister's wedding as her +1. That night, while we were slow dancing under a string of fairy lights in a backyard full of tipsy strangers, she leaned in and said, "You're not nearly as invisible as you think you are, you know." That hit me harder than any insult Darren had ever thrown. Because she was right. I'd spent years fading into the background, thinking that being quiet meant being overlooked. But I was wrong. Quiet didn't mean weak. It didn't mean passive. It just meant I was saving my energy for things that mattered. And now? Now I had energy to spare. I started volunteering with a local mentorship program that paired professionals with high school seniors interested in logistics and operations careers. It felt good to pour into someone without an agenda, to answer questions from kids who reminded me of myself. Curious, cautious, unsure if they belonged in spaces that rarely made room for them. And the house. The house came alive. I finished the library and turned the guest room into a creative space. Not for me, necessarily, but for whoever might use it one day. I hosted a couple of coworkers for a small dinner party, something I never thought I'd do. We drank wine, the good kind this time, played cards, and shared stories without any competitive edge, no one trying to one-up the other. There was laughter in the house again. Real laughter. Even my neighbors, who'd kept their distance during the family drama, started waving when they saw me outside. One of them, a retired contractor named Glenn, offered to help me replace the fencing around the back garden. We spent weekends working on it together, and he ended up becoming something of a surrogate uncle figure. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he told me one day, wiping sweat from his brow. "Don't let leeches make you forget that." Leeches. I didn't need to ask who he was referring to. By now, Darren had become a whisper in the wind. I heard little things, through mutual acquaintances, distant relatives, social media, I no longer followed but occasionally peeked at through burner tabs. His startup? Folded in 4 months. He blamed internal miscommunication and market instability. The truth? Investors pulled out when one of them found out about the flagged bank incident, something that had quietly followed him. It wasn't public, but in those circles, word spreads fast. His social media posts became more erratic, motivational quotes with passive-aggressive undertones, screenshots of bank apps cropped in just the right way to show balances, tagged photos at overpriced restaurants where he looked like he was trying too hard. He was spiraling. But unlike before, I wasn't circling with him. I let go. Completely. I stopped checking. Stopped wondering. Stopped hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd come around and offer a real apology. That ship had sailed. I had new people in my life now. People who valued me not because they needed something from me, but because they saw me. Ava and I started dating officially. Slowly. Carefully. We both had scars, but we made space for each other's stories. One night, as we were walking back to my house from a neighborhood fair, she asked if I had any siblings. I hesitated for the briefest moment before saying, "I used to." She didn't press, and I loved her for that. Then came the day that changed everything. It was late spring. The house smelled like fresh paint and coffee. I had the windows open, sunlight spilling into the kitchen. I was sipping tea and reviewing a mentorship application when my doorbell rang. Unexpected. I opened the door and froze. Darren. He looked smaller. Not in height, not physically, but in presence. The bravado was gone. He wore jeans and a wrinkled hoodie, hands shoved in his pockets. His eyes were tired. Not red, not puffy, just tired. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside, silently inviting him in. He looked around the house like it was foreign territory, like he hadn't once joked about turning it into a rental property. "Nice place," he muttered. I said nothing. He wandered to the edge of the library, leaned on the doorframe. His eyes swept the shelves, the armchairs, the rug. "You finished it," he said. I nodded. He was quiet for a while. Then, "I messed up." The words hung in the air. "I know," I said. He turned to face me, expression unreadable. "I just wanted to prove something," he added. "To everyone. To myself. I thought if I got the business going, if I looked successful, maybe people would stop seeing me as the mess up." I stayed silent. He looked down at the floor. "You were always the one who had it together, even when no one noticed. And I hated that. I hated that you never needed anyone." I almost laughed. "I needed people," I said. "I just stopped asking when I realized they wouldn't show up." That stung him. I could see it. He looked back at the shelves. "I want to make it right," he said finally. "I don't know how, but I'm trying." I let out a slow breath. This was the moment. The moment people dream about. When the villain lowers his sword, when the wounded brother apologizes, when things can finally be mended. But I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt powerful, not in a vengeful, lording over kind of way, but in a way that said, "I survived you, and I don't need you anymore." I walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of tea, and returned to the living room. "You want to make it right?" I asked. He nodded eagerly. I handed him the cup, then sat down. "Start by listening," I said, "and don't interrupt." He sat across from me, cradling the cup of tea I gave him like it was a peace offering. I could see his hands trembling slightly as the steam rose between us, curling into the quiet. For the first time in my life, Darren didn't fill the silence. He just waited. I studied him for a moment. Not just his expression, but the weight behind it. This wasn't the same Darren who used to strut into a room like the air was lucky to have him. There was a slump to his shoulders now, a drag in his voice. He looked like a man who'd finally run out of versions of himself to pretend to be. But I'd seen his apologies before. I'd watched him cry in front of our parents after crashing a car and somehow walk away with a new one. I'd watched him manipulate relatives into bankrolling his ventures with words like potential and next phase, while I paid my way through community college 2 shifts at a time. So while I could see the sincerity trying to crawl through his tired eyes, I also saw the flicker of calculation. And I wasn't about to forget who I was dealing with. I set my tea down. Start talking. He took a long breath. After the loan fell through, I tried to go solo. I pitched to some investors on my own, but one of them asked about my name being flagged in a fraud report. That's how I knew you'd reported it. I didn't say anything. I just waited. At first, I was angry, he admitted. Really angry. I told myself you were trying to ruin me. I even tried to fix it, spin it. Make myself the victim. You mean lie? He flinched. Yeah, lie. And frame me. He couldn't meet my eyes. I filed the complaint with the tax office too, he added after a moment. I was desperate. I thought if I couldn't have the house, maybe I could make your life hard enough that you'd cave. There it was. The admission. He looked up, finally. I didn't think you'd fight back. You never used to. I leaned back in my chair. Maybe you never pushed hard enough before. That silence again. He sipped his tea, probably to stall. Then he said, I know I don't deserve another chance. I'm not asking for one, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. I started working at a logistics startup, just entry level. Real work. Regular hours. No shortcuts. I raised an eyebrow. They know your history? Yeah. I was honest this time. Told them about the bank situation, the failed ventures. They still hired me. I couldn't tell if that was redemption or recklessness on the company's part. Either way, something in my chest loosened slightly. I still didn't trust him, but I was intrigued. And then he said something that made me sit up. My manager? He's building out a new supplier vetting system. Said they're looking for someone experienced in contract operations, someone who understands both the logistics side and the risk mitigation side. I didn't respond, but my ears perked up. That was my specialty. Darren went on, unaware he'd just dropped a match into gasoline. He's been complaining about how hard it is to find someone who isn't just a spreadsheet monkey. He wants someone who can see patterns, anticipate failures before they happen. Said if I knew anyone like that, to let him know. That part almost made me laugh. I didn't know someone like that. Me. He looked at me then, probably hoping I'd bite. That I'd offer to meet his manager. Or ask for an intro. But I didn't. Because I wasn't interested in being handed an opportunity by Darren, even if he meant well. Still, I filed the information away. Not because I planned to exploit it, at least not yet, but because it confirmed something I'd quietly suspected for a while. I was finally entering rooms Darren couldn't talk his way into. And that changed everything. A few weeks passed. I kept living my life. Promotion settled in. Ava and I grew closer. She'd started leaving her scarf on the coat rack and her coffee mug on the sink like it was her house too. And I didn't mind at all. We weren't in a rush, but we were steady. Real. Darren kept his distance. Occasionally he'd send a short text, an article about supply chain tech, a hope you're well, even a screenshot of his updated credit score, which, to be fair, had improved. I responded, but rarely. One-word replies. Deliberate coldness. Then one morning, I got an email from someone named Raphael Lyons. Subject, Strategic Vendor Expansion Initiative. It was from the company Darren worked at, the startup he'd mentioned. Raphael introduced himself as the regional operations lead and said he'd been referred by an employee who spoke highly of your logistics insight and systems expertise. There was no mention of Darren's name, but I knew. They wanted to schedule a call. I stared at the email for a long time. It would be easy to delete it, or ghost them, or say I wasn't interested. But then I remembered something Uncle Mike once told me. If you ever find yourself with the high ground, don't use it to gloat. Use it to decide who gets to climb. I scheduled the call. We talked. The conversation went well. Raphael was sharp, pragmatic, no nonsense, and focused. He wasn't interested in fluff or trendy jargon. He wanted results. Data. Infrastructure. I gave him both. We talked about streamlining procurement processes, optimizing vendor rotations, risk metrics, and KPI frameworks. 2 days later, they offered me a 6-month consulting contract. Independent. Flexible hours. Remote optional. More importantly, full access to their internal systems. I said yes. Not for Darren. For me. I dove in head first. Built out a diagnostic tool for vendor comparison. Helped them renegotiate 3 bloated contracts. Identified a low-grade fraud risk in one of their freight partners that saved them close to $70,000. Raphael was thrilled. He told me, "If you ever want to come on full-time, the door's open." But I wasn't done yet. One day, during a systems audit, I came across something interesting. It was buried in a shared folder, a proposal from Darren, a pitch for a new client acquisition model. He'd labeled it preliminary, Q3 strategy. It wasn't terrible, a bit ambitious. A lot of style, not enough substance. But what caught my eye was the financial projection slide. I'd seen it before. Not just the format, the actual numbers. Word for word. I pulled up an old file from my mentorship deck. One I'd shared in a guest lecture last year at a local college. Slide 6. Same phrasing. Same growth trajectory chart. Even the footnotes matched, down to the typo in forecasted. He'd copied me. Not just the idea, the work. And that's when everything clicked. Darren wasn't trying to fix things. He was trying to rebuild his image using my blueprints. Quietly, subtly, borrowing pieces of my ideas and repackaging them as his own, probably thinking I'd never notice. And I might not have, if I hadn't gotten into that powerful position. I sat back in my chair, staring at the proposal. There it was again. That old, familiar impulse, to confront, to call him out, to demand an apology. But this time, I didn't feel the need. I didn't need Darren to admit anything. I just needed to decide what kind of revenge I wanted. The satisfying kind. The strategic kind. The kind that wasn't loud, but permanent. Because now I had all the tools. I had access, influence, a direct line to the people who controlled Darren's career. And unlike Darren, I knew exactly how to use power without anyone noticing until it was too late. I didn't act right away. That's the thing people misunderstand about revenge. The most satisfying kind isn't impulsive. It's not a door slammed in someone's face or a shouting match in the rain. It's not revenge when it feels cathartic. It's revenge when it's strategic, quiet, permanent. I gave myself a few days to think, to simmer without boiling. I went about my work as if nothing had changed, answering emails, attending Zoom calls, offering polite suggestions in Slack channels, all while carrying the weight of Darren's little theft in the back of my mind like a gift-wrapped grenade. He didn't know I'd seen it. He had no idea I was working for the same company, let alone that I had access to the very system where he'd uploaded the stolen slide deck. I was operating behind the curtain now, and he was still performing center stage, oblivious to the fact that the spotlight was on a trapdoor. First, I documented everything. I downloaded the proposal and my original mentorship deck. I highlighted every matching sentence, every identical number, every chart that had been lifted without modification. I even screenshotted the typo, forecasted, and cross-referenced the timestamp on my original file, which was safely backed up on Google Drive, dated 7 months earlier. Then, I drafted a short internal report and titled it, Potential IP Misuse in Strategic Planning Material for Discretionary Review. I didn't send it right away. I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I waited for the perfect opportunity, the kind Darren used to live for. High stakes, lots of eyes, no room for failure. And wouldn't you know it, that opportunity came 2 weeks later. Raphael, my direct contact, looped me into a major quarterly planning session. The leadership team was finalizing pitches for a new investor partnership, a big one. Multi-year logistics overhaul, full system integration, with Darren's team responsible for drafting the client acquisition and growth strategy portion of the proposal. It was going to be presented to the board, the investors, and the regional stakeholders. In person, they booked a retreat-style offsite at a boutique venue north of the city, the kind of place with reclaimed wood walls, endless coffee refills, and whiteboards taller than most employees. Raphael asked if I could attend and give a quick 10-minute analysis of risk indicators in vendor sourcing. I said I'd be honored. The day of the offsite, I wore a charcoal button-down, clean slacks, no tie. Understated, professional, not flashy. I looked like someone you wouldn't remember, which is exactly how I wanted it. Darren was already there when I arrived, standing near the barista station, charming a small crowd with one of his trademark grand stories. I kept my distance. He hadn't seen me yet. I didn't even think he knew my name was on the attendee list. The presentations began. A few executives spoke. Raphael gave his welcome remarks and gestured toward me with a casual. And of course, Sean Wexler is here as a consulting analyst. He'll be weighing in on the procurement models after the strategic growth pitch. Darren froze. I didn't even look at him. Just nodded politely to the room and resumed reviewing the notes on my tablet. When it was his turn, he stepped up to the front confidently, even if his face had lost a bit of color. Today I want to walk you through a bold new client acquisition strategy, he began, tapping the first slide of his presentation. Something we're calling the compound growth matrix, designed to scale onboarding while maintaining lean overhead. I could almost hear the gears in his head stuttering. He'd planned for this pitch to be his big moment, his redemption arc. He'd probably practiced it in front of a mirror. But now I was in the room, and he didn't know what I was going to do. Slide after slide, he moved through the proposal. He had charisma. I'll give him that. He knew how to spin jargon into something that sounded profound, even if it lacked substance. A few heads nodded. Raphael was watching closely, arms folded. Then came slide 6. The chart. The forecast. The exact duplicate of my mentorship deck. And I raised my hand. Quick question, I said calmly. Would you mind going back one slide? Darren hesitated, then flipped it back. I stood. My voice was quiet, even. I wasn't angry. I was surgical. I've seen this chart before. In fact, I created it. The room went still. I tapped my tablet and brought up my own slide, the original version, with the same forecast and the same typo. I presented this to a group of high school seniors last year during a career mentorship event. It was uploaded to my Google Drive on March 14th at 7:32 p.m. The typo in forecasted is mine, and it appears here, in this proposal. Darren's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. I've cross-referenced the data. It's a direct lift. Word for word. Even the footnotes match. I have both documents ready to submit to the review committee for an internal IP audit. Raphael looked between the two slides. So did the others. A couple of them began whispering. I sat down slowly. The silence in the room was volcanic. Darren tried to recover. I must have used a reference file and forgot to update the credits. Total oversight. No credits were included. I replied without looking at him. The metadata shows you created the file last month. You'd have to explain how you accessed my deck. It was never public. Now Raphael spoke. His voice was steel. Darren, did you use Sean's proprietary content without permission? Darren's mouth opened and closed like a puppet with cut strings. I didn't. I mean, maybe I used a template from a shared folder or... Raphael raised his hand. Enough. We'll take this offline. Let's break for lunch. The room emptied faster than I'd ever seen a group of executives move. No one wanted to be associated with what was unraveling. I stayed seated. Raphael walked over quietly, sat next to me. Thank you, he said. You handled that professionally. I wanted it to be clear, I replied. No drama. Just truth. He nodded, then added. This isn't the first time I've had a feeling something was off. But this seals it. He stood and left. I didn't see Darren for the rest of the retreat. Rumor had it he left early, citing a family emergency. By the end of the week, he was gone. Not just from the team, from the company. Raphael never gave me the details, and I didn't ask. But a few weeks later, I was offered a permanent role, head of strategic logistics planning. I turned it down. I didn't need the title. I didn't need to stay. My revenge wasn't about climbing over Darren. It was about walking away while he was still scrambling for the ladder. I'd exposed him quietly, truthfully, completely. There were no raised voices, no accusations, just undeniable facts, calmly delivered in a room where it mattered most. And now, Darren was the one carrying the scarlet letter, not me. Fallout wasn't a lightning strike. It was a slow collapse, quiet, calculated, and irreversible. I didn't hear from Darren for nearly 2 months after the retreat. No texts, no calls, not even a half-hearted, you misunderstood message like he used to send when he felt the world slipping from his grip. I figured he was laying low, probably licking his wounds and trying to rebrand the whole incident as another miscommunication. That was always his move, rewrite the past faster than anyone could confirm it. But the thing about falling from a height you were never meant to reach, it leaves you with nowhere to land. I found out through a mutual acquaintance, someone who used to work on the same floor at the startup, that Darren hadn't just been fired. He'd been blacklisted. Quietly, sure. But word had spread. The investor who'd attended that offsite pulled their interest from the company altogether, citing internal integrity concerns. A full audit was launched, and though the report was sealed, it didn't take long for Darren's name to become shorthand in the company Slack for what not to do. Apparently, he'd tried applying to another logistics firm 3 weeks later, one Raphael had ties to. He didn't even get a second interview. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant. Not in the way I thought I would. There was no slow-motion victory lap, no champagne cork popping in the background. Just peace. I was finally free of him. But the real fallout came when Mom called. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I remember because I was organizing the last of the books in Uncle Mike's library, the final piece in a project that had taken me the better part of a year. I had just placed a copy of Dune on the top shelf when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Mom, incoming call. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. Her voice cracked immediately. Sean. It was a whisper, the kind you only hear when someone's already lost the argument they haven't started yet. Hi, Mom. I talked to Darren. Silence. He told me what happened. Or his version of it. She sniffled. Said you embarrassed him. Destroyed his reputation. Cost him his job. I didn't respond. He sounded broken, she added, as if that was somehow my doing. Like someone who doesn't know what to do next. I waited. But then, she said slowly, I talked to Raphael. That made me pause. I called the company, she admitted. Used his name, asked to speak to someone. I needed to know if it was true. I needed to hear it from someone who wasn't you or Darren. And I asked. And he confirmed everything. Said you handled it professionally. That you were calm. Respectful. That Darren had stolen your work and tried to pass it off as his. I said nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered. Those 2 words landed harder than any insult ever had. For what? For not believing you. For blaming you. For being so blind. Her voice broke again. I thought I was protecting him, but all I did was enable him. I let him lie and lie, and every time you told the truth, I made you feel like the villain. A long pause. You were never the problem, Sean. He was. He still is. I felt something heavy loosen in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but release. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. We talked a little longer. About the house. About Ava. About work. She didn't ask to come visit, and I didn't offer. The gap between us was still there, but for the first time in my life, she saw it too. And that was enough. A few days later, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. Sloppy penmanship on a folded piece of lined notebook paper. The kind you'd expect from a teenager grounded for lying about curfew. Not from a 30-something man who had once tried to destroy your life. Sean, I messed up. Worse than ever before. I know you don't owe me anything, not even the time to read this. But I wanted to say it clearly. I'm sorry. Not the half sorry I've given you in the past. Not the kind that tries to make excuses. Just sorry. I was jealous of you for years. Still am, probably. You've always been the better brother. Smarter. Kinder. More disciplined. I hated you for it, because deep down, I knew I couldn't compete. So I tore you down instead. You didn't deserve that. You never did. I've been trying to fix things, but every door feels shut now. I get why you won't answer. I get why you didn't warn me at the retreat. I wouldn't have, either. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I wanted to write this before I disappear for a while. I'm moving, don't know where yet. Just away. Gonna try to rebuild. Actually rebuild. Maybe that starts with telling the truth for once. Take care of the house. You deserve it. You always did. Darren. I read the letter once, then again. And then I put it in the back of a drawer in the library. Not out of spite, just as a reminder that the past doesn't vanish. It stays with us. But it doesn't have to define us. The next time I saw my parents was 3 weeks later, at a quiet dinner Ava and I hosted at the house. Mom brought dessert. Dad brought a bottle of red wine, the good kind. There were no speeches, no apologies, no dramatic confrontations. Just quiet laughter. Small talk. A new kind of stillness. They hadn't changed overnight. But they were trying. And this time, I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I wasn't performing for scraps of affection. I was just me. When they left, Ava and I stood by the front door, watching their taillights disappear into the distance. She looked up at me and asked, "You okay?" I smiled. "Yeah, I really am." Later that night, I walked into the library and stood in the doorway. Books neatly shelved. Desk organized. Hardwood floors clean and polished. The room was finally finished. But more than that, I'd lost a brother, but I'd gained something else. A life that no longer made space for people who only knew how to take. And as I turned off the light, the house finally felt quiet in the way I'd always hoped it would. Not empty. At peace.